This is a work in progress. This is a draft, and but it's very close to home. Has to do with Hudson's water supply, where we get our water from, which some of you may know, some of you may not. Yeah, the reason I wanted to do this is I wanted to make the next book on Hudson's water. So this is kind of an intro and a background to that. And speaking of that, I think all of you know and all of you have the books, which we've done previously. Yes? Yes. A lot of nodding of heads? Not even if you didn't. Great. Okay. Well, I've had a long interest in water, and been around this place kind of a long time. I went on conservation in '72. Hate to think how long ago that was. It was for quite a long time. And then I was the rep, the MAPC, Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which deals with the regional planning agency. Christina Johnson, who is our town planner, is now the MAPC rep. I was on with the planning board for a couple of terms, so I've sort of floated along through this stuff on a county board and done a lot with the lake, all of which kind of focused on water. So I've had a long interest in water. Credits, ooh, there he is. I blame him, Tony, Bob Moriarty, who I met with running DPW, the water, very interested in history, was very helpful. The newspapers at the library, if you don't know about it and if you're interested, they're really great. Can be frustrating, but it's really great. And Melissa there. And Town Hall, always harass people at Town Hall. It's always a lot of fun. I came across this because it has to do with water. We always think of the water planet. They always talk about the water planet. You think, oh my God, the whole thing is water. If you took all of the water on the earth, oceans, lakes, everything, and put it into a bubble, it would be that big. All of it, most of it, is salt. If you're talking about fresh water, it's that. It's somewhere in Georgia. So we tend to think there's an abundance of water, and there is, but we are seemingly awfully good at messing it up. But that's really a part one kind of idea. So just keeping that in mind. Okay, moving on. I don't know how many of you are that familiar with where we actually do get our water from. We have 5 major sources and a couple that we've had and have abandoned. One of which is Gates Pond, and we'll say a lot about Gates Pond, which is actually not even in Hudson. It's in Berlin. We have the Chestnut Street wells. There are 3 wells there, if you're familiar with Ferjulians. On the east side, you go down, there's Chestnut Street, and then there's the swamp beyond that, between Chestnut and Main Street to the north. We have several wells in there. We have another well directly across from the Sauter Fields. You probably go by it. It's Tessier Machine. Yeah, right there. And right adjacent to that is a road. You probably don't even notice it, but it goes down into the swamplands behind, and that's the Cane well. We have the Cranberry well. And what I want to do is I want to concentrate on Gates Pond here in Berlin and the Cranberry well, and just mention briefly the other Cane and Chestnut Street wells, kind of in passing. Much of it comes from the Cranberry well, which is off Parmenter Road, and you know just where it is because it's adjacent to the radio tower off Parmenter Road. And this was back in '08 and in '14, and you can see it's been a significant supplier of town water, about a quarter down through time. Cane well has provided quite a bit. These are the Chestnut Street wells. There are 3 of them. One of them went out, didn't produce, so they drilled it. They called it 1. They drilled 1A reasonably close. So that's about half. And then finally Gates Pond, which used to be somewhat more than it is now. So what did we use water for in the old days? Well, obviously domestic use. But if you do any of this reading, you discover they used a lot of it for washing streets. You say, what the Christ? Well, you have to remember, up until early 1900, what provided the motive power for society? Horses. And horses tend to generate a lot of manure. And manure tends to dry out, and it gets very dusty, especially when they keep pounding up and down the streets on it. And by the way, it was not only horses. There were also pigs and so forth. People had all kinds of animals. And there was just a lot of stuff, so they did a lot of street washing. Firefighting, one of the major things that was done, even though we weren't terribly efficient at it in the earliest days, and then finally to get rid of waste. Okay, how did we actually get it? Well, in the beginning, dipping buckets in the streams, dug wells. I can't imagine digging a well in the old days. They would dig a well, probably 4 feet in diameter, dig it down, line it with stones, and go down as far as they could to the water table and bring it up by a bucket. And then later we graduated to points. We were on points down Lake Boone up until town water came through on my street in the late 90s. So a lot of people, and especially in towns as Stowe, who do not have town water. They're all individual wells. And then water pumps came in. You can use gravity if you can from a reservoir. Development of high-capacity pumps, municipal wells and reservoirs, and so forth. Now, here is Hudson. Downtown is here. This is the Assabet, the thicker green line flowing upper right or bottom left. Which way does it flow? Towards the upper right. Goes off through Stowe, Maynard, and then continues on to Concord and so forth. So we have a number of small tributaries to it, which become important, one of which is Hog Brook, coming down this way, coming out of west of 495 and down through the trailer park, and then ultimately into this little pond here, which we know as Tripp's Pond, right here, and then into the Assabet. Coming down from the north, Danforth Brook, flowing from the north, pretty much due south into this pond here, which we know as Bruce's Pond, after Mr. Bruce, who apparently built the dam. And then Fort Meadow Brook, which is by far the largest one because it drains Fort Meadow, and that flows north here. And then finally there's one other brook, so-called Cranberry Brook, which you're probably not that familiar with because it's pretty well hidden down here. And the interesting thing about that brook, Hop Brook, not Hog, that goes to the Sudbury. That's the only drainage that does not come into the Assabet. It flows due east. We have a little more to say about that later. Okay.
What's the dotted line for?
Oh, that's the watershed divide.
Okay.
I took a stab at it. But we know that one goes that way into Sudbury, into the Carding Mill Pond and all those others in Marlborough and Sudbury. Okay, well, the actual water sources, we ID'd them before. This is the Gates Pond here in Berlin. What do you mean in Berlin? This is Hudson. Well, we'll get to that in a moment. The red are active wells, Chestnut Street, which we mentioned. There are 3 wells there. the Cane Well off Main Street, and then finally the one off Parmenter Road, the so-called Cranberry Well. Now, those are the active wells now. We do have several that were established that are no longer being used. One of them, the Rimkus Well, down here, if you travel River Road to 495, you go under 495 there, but immediately before it, on the left, is Four Bridges and Rimkus Road, I think it is. And if you take Rimkus Road, it turns to, it's abandoned, but you can walk through it. You come to the well house, and we're going to mention that, but that's abandoned. The other one was the Cock Street Well, which is in the wetland across from the garage where Cock Street has that stop sign, and there's that little strip mall. I think it's Old Bolton Road and Old Stowe Road, right at that corner, that wetland there. And that one was established quite a long time ago. Now, there is one other obvious, well, I shouldn't say obvious. There is one other source that was spoken of, never used, and that, of course, was probably the most obvious one, was the river. We never actually did use the river for a variety of reasons, which we'll briefly mention. Okay, let's talk about Gates Pond, by far the more interesting. The problem with talking about wells, you got just a pipe, a hole in the ground, and a building. Not very exciting. But reservoirs are, and especially this one. This is, how many have been to Gates Pond and walked around Gates Pond? Ah, okay, great. Well, it's not in Hudson, never was in Hudson. Actually, it isn't even Middlesex County, it's in the next county, in Worcester. Here is a Google Earth. This is 495 here, 62 Central Street, we've all been down that one, and immediately after you passed 495, you go, and then there's a gas station on your left. Before the gas station, unless you looked for it, you missed it. There is a road called Taylor Road. And it's in terrible shape, but you go in that road, and that brings you, you can just about see it, runs right down here and right to the head of Gates Pond. If you haven't done it, I would certainly urge you to do it. It is a great walk, and I'll show you some pictures. This actually, because of the angle of the sun, outlines Gates Pond here, which is quite a decent size. That's the town line. Hudson to the right, to the east, and Berlin to the west. There is a video of that Berlin gave 15 years ago on Gates Pond, the history of Gates Pond. And it's kind of neat. It does suffer from a couple of problems. One is that it's really kind of hard to hear because way in the back was the microphone. But well worth it. Okay, well, just how big is Gates Pond? Well, it's about 90 acres. All right, what does that mean? Well, that doesn't really help very much unless you're a surveyor. But if you go White Pond near the Firefighting Academy, everybody know where we are, going to Stowe, and the road and the pond are 40 feet apart. I mean, you can't miss it. We'll have more to say about it later. That's only about 50 acres. And you can actually see almost all of it if you look. But you can't look. It's a terrible turn. But anyway, so that's White Pond. Lake Williams and Marlborough, Route 20, comes along here, 495 to the north. That is 70 acres. And if you haven't done this, you really have to. This is the one with the boardwalk. That boardwalk is incredible. Just a wonderful idea. The only problem is parking is minimal over here, but whatever. Okay, well, this is an old map, 1870 map. Here is Gates Pond here. Here's the town line. You saw that a little bit before. Hudson to the east, and this is all Berlin here. Now, it's in Berlin. How did we get it? Well, we're a slightly bigger town than Berlin ever was. And we had a little more clout than Berlin had. So we had an act passed in the Great and General Court, otherwise known as the Massachusetts Legislature. We love to call it a court. It's the legislature. So we had Chapter 149, 1883, pass an act that said, we're going to take it. And you can read it. How do you do things like this? Well, simple enough. Eminent domain. For the lawyers amongst you, how do you pull off eminent domain? Well, you declare a public purpose, and you say you're going to provide just compensation. We never bought anything from Berlin. We did buy from the people who own the property, but not the town. And we'll have more to say about eminent domain. This also occurred in the Cranberry Well. This issue popped up in a very interesting way. Okay, well, this is the pond. It's spectacular. It is very nice, completely surrounded with almost pure pine. Not by accident, these were planted a long time ago. Turn of the century stuff, we love to plant pines. Lake Boone had the same issue. And if you go around Lake Boone now, and this one as well, all the pines are reasonably the same height, which suggests they were all pretty much at the same time. This is the dam at the lower end. It actually was a natural pond. There was a stream flowing through it and a sort of natural dam that backed it up. Should have pointed that out on that previous map. But this is the dam here. This is the walkway down at the bottom end of the pond on the southern end, right down here. There is sort of an inlet coming in here. Not many inlets. And the outlet is here. It curves around and joins the Assabet somewhat below.
Where's the pump house on that?
Pump house is right up here at the end of this arrow. Okay. The arrow indicates, generically, the pipes that were put in the 1890s to bring water from Gates Pond to downtown Hudson, which is over here. Okay, well, this is just another view. This actually goes to the pond over here, and this is part of the ring road, which goes all the way around. And it's really very nice. Now, these are the, we can't call them pump houses, Tony, can we? They're intake. So this is the top end of the pond, and these two are pretty much what you come to when you first come down to the pond and start going around. One of these, I think this one, is in pretty tough shape. Some of the bricks are crumbling and so forth over the years. Now, one of the reasons for spending a lot of time on Gates Pond is once the town took it, and once we started to pay off people and take property and so forth, you come across a whole series of articles. This is 1899, but particularly read this. Over 1,100 present on the grounds. It was a major resort. A lot of the land on both sides of it was open. In fact, before it was taken, one of the things that you see a lot of in the paper are the cows that used to come down from the hill and graze in the lake, which people didn't think that was such a great idea for a water supply. But it was really quite open, and they had all kinds of activities, games, houses that you could rent, picnics. It was just a major destination, and there were barges, not as in water, but buckboards kind of thing, that brought people to here from downtown Hudson, from other towns, and there was a regular back and forth trade. When you read this, I saw that in the same paper. I couldn't resist. People in those days had a bit of a...
The owner was that
Yeah, they were kind of cute. You know, they did these little notes. That was very popular, little 2-3 liners. Not all jokes necessarily, but stuff like this. Couldn't resist that. Okay, Nathan Russell, Hudson boy, got unhappy in 1901 and should come of the use of the pond for picnic, pleasure, swept forever from the banks of the water supply for Hudson. We demand cleanliness, eternal vigilance, and keep the pulverized manure from being blown in our faces upon the clothes we wear. So, 1902, you see a lot of this goings on at the Gates Pond Resort, in effect. Private property. There was a hotel, and we got a couple of pictures, not good, but you get the idea. Cottages at the Great Pond, they list who was there. 4-pound bass, the Congregational were holding their picnic. 7th grade from Clinton schools came. They just kept coming on and on. This is an early map. Did you give me this, Tony? Forgotten. But here is an outline map. Sorry, it isn't. It's what it is. This is Taylor Road coming in. Here's 495. But here, you see little scribblings. Those were the houses. And there were a lot more on the uphill side, on the Sawyer Hill side. Sawyer Hill is here, and you know it across from, if you go Central Street, 62, and come to Berlin Orchards on the right, immediately on the left is the Equestrian Center. You go up that steep hill. It's beautiful. And that is Sawyer Hill over here, this side. And I'm told that there are a bunch of foundations, some foundations that you can still see. Okay, well, these are some of the places. And there are a lot of other pictures. I've got to get to the Berlin Society and see if we can get some more of these. But there was kind of like Lake Boone, a thriving community, although it did not develop into a community in the sense that Lake Boone did. Okay, 1907, buildings at Gates Pond to go under the hammer. Well, we had the property. We bought it from the people, presumably at fair market value. And everybody knows the definition of fair market value. Any real estate people here?
Yes.
First thing you learn
Fair market value is a buyer who doesn't have to buy, buying from a seller who doesn't have to sell. That's the official.
Who is this guy?
The moderator.
What a willing seller will pay a willing buyer, both in complete possession of all of the facts. How often do you meet that definition? But at any rate, there will be wood, timber, sold public auction, 16 buildings. Buildings include the Gates Pond House, formerly occupied by Fred Fosgate. Fosgate was the name for this area, despite it being called Gates Pond. Gates had very little to do with it way back in the 1700s. But there were many Fosgates who owned. Summer boarding house, cottages, barn, 2 hen houses, ice house, dance hall, stable shed, tool house, 2 open summer houses, boathouse, and other property. So there was just a remarkable amount of activity going on. Okay, after we had laid pipes, brought water to downtown. And how did it get from Gates Pond to downtown? Pipes. Gravity. Because it's about 100 feet, I think, actually maybe a little more, between the surface or so of Gates Pond and Wood Square. So it would go by gravity. There was talk at one point of using Little Pond in Bolton, which is a funny little pond if you take 85. Yeah, where the camps are. Camp Virginia. Yes, that in Boy Scouts in that area. There's a pond on your left. I think actually two in there. Problem with that one is it's lower than downtown, so doesn't work. Beauty of gravity, it's never failed yet. So okay, well, over the years, 1908, there are reports that said we got plenty of water and you can drink it. One of the problems people complained about is because it was an open reservoir, an open body of water, it would have algae and so forth and give strange kind of tastes, and people were complaining, and turbid and all this sort of stuff. Safe to drink, but not palatable often. Okay, from time to time they opened the pond for fishing and then closed the pond for fishing. Just went back and forth. This was an interesting article, early 30s, beginning of the Depression, or probably the height of the Depression, extolling the virtues of the pond 25, 30, 40 years previous. It was a nostalgic piece, bringing back memories to old-timers who experienced it when they were young. And there were similar sorts of articles for Lake Boone, and I'm sure most lakes. Let's see, a very popular resort 25 years ago. Cattle no longer graze in the meadows and on the hill slopes, wallow in the mud, and wade out into the cool waters. No longer do that, because it was bought and that was banned. Passed all kinds of regulations. 34 said you can't do much of anything there because it's a water supply. Can't swim, can't boat, can't fish. You can look at it. Now, this is interesting because we come up to a series of droughts over time. This was 1940, almost the beginning of the war, but the end of the Depression. Rainfall went down here 10 inches below the 10-year average. And then you get articles at the end of the war said, well, it's rained a lot and it's come up. I love this. This is the Hudson Daily Sun, smallest town in the world with a daily paper. Who knew? Okay, 1960s. This is a crucial time in the world. And as I look around, now this was 1960, so I don't think any of you, or very many, would easily remember the 1960s. Okay, a couple of things happened which related directly to water supply. And I just picked up a few thoughts. Our population went up, and I'll show you a graph here. Major subdivisions were built. Anybody remember Andy Lane? Increasing taxes, more burden on residential, by definition. Industrial Commission, which was established at that time. You'll see more on this in just a moment. Most significant drought, we often forget this, in the mid-60s. Show you some figures on that. Great demand on the water resources and efforts to acquire more supplies. So the 60s were a crucial period. Here's our population. 1960, 9,600. 1970, it went to 16,000. Went up 77% in 10 years. And this was during the time when there was a lot of flight from the cities out to the suburbs. Subdivisions were built and that sort of thing. Notice one thing, by the way. Look what's happened here. There is beginning serious talk about what's happening to the population now. Now, this is one town, but it seems to be somewhat reflective of what's happening on a much larger scale than just Hudson, but not a concern here. Okay, this is maybe a little too complicated, but this is a graph. Here is, things are even. The bars going up, it gets drier. The bars going down, it gets wetter. And these are years. Sorry, you can't see them very well. I tried to expand it, but it wouldn't work. But notice here, this is the 1960s, right in here. The darker lines, the heavier lines, the drier the conditions. In the 1950s, and this is what's happening here, we had 2 hurricanes in the mid-50s. Anybody remember them?
Yeah, Carol and Diane.
Carol and Diane. God, you are old. Can't believe it.
Not as old as you.
Okay, Worcester rainfall, 63 to 66. 63, it was 37 inches, and it went down to 29. Average is 45. So if you figure 15, 30, 45, this is only 2/3 of the average rainfall. It was a very significant drought. Increasing population, decreasing rainfall. What are we doing? Looking for more water. This was Quabbin. This wasn't just Hudson. This was Quabbin. Quabbin went way down. Major supply for Boston from the western part of the state. So we began to develop some wells. The Cranberry Well in 1967 on the far east. The Kane Well the year before on Main Street, across from Sauter Fields. The Chestnut Wells, 82, 89, and 91. Now, this is interesting. You'll have to bear with me. I don't expect you to read this, but this is actually a letter that was written because the person who wrote it was running for office. But it did cite a couple of things here which are interesting. This is during the height of the drought in 65. Public health would not allow the use of the Assabet River. For a couple of reasons. One is they were dumping stuff upstream in the Assabet, not a good deal. The other thing was you'd have to pump it up into Gates Pond to make it useful. But anyway, we turned to the MDC for help. Well, that's the MWRA now, hoping to tie into Marlboro, which was done a couple of times, but not at this point. So we developed the Cranberry Well. This letter was 66, just at the time Cranberry Well was being bought. And we had a couple of other wells. Rimkus, no longer used. We mentioned that. Cox Street, we mentioned that, no longer used. And drawing on Gates Pond, which was being used. Now, who wrote the letter? Some of you might recognize the name, but the point is, what did Junior ultimately become? And probably established? The Industrial Commission, which pushed very strongly and successfully for industry to come into Hudson through the Industrial Commission. And one of his things, his first tasks was to say to the town and voters, I have an industry who will come in, but only if we can provide, pick a number, assured water. And I believe it was Coro, which is now Grand Image, down where the Assabet Rail Trail crosses Lower Main Street, in that area there, the big building on the left, right next to the Poor Farm Cemetery. Because up to that, there wasn't all that much industry. So the taxes fell on primarily residential. And what was being argued here is we need industry to support industry. Now, whether or not that part of town, that section, was a good idea or not is almost irrelevant at this point because it was developed on Lower Main Street and also on Parmenter Road. There was a subsequent issue with the Cranberry Well with one of the industries on Parmenter Road. Okay, well, speaking of that, brings us to the Cranberry Well. Here is what is now the rail trail. If you bike, it's fabulous. If you walk, it's even nicer. But it's really great, and I got to credit Eversource for doing a nice job in developing that road. It really is spectacular. And if you go from Hudson, you can go all the way to Sudbury and hitch up with the Freeman Trail in South Sudbury, and that goes all the way up to Lowell. And it's really quite something. At any rate, so here's Lower Main Street, here. Lake Boone, here. One of our key road here is Parmenter Road, which is like this. And one of our leading citizens of Hudson lives on Parmenter Road. Forgotten who. If you go a little further, there is White Pond Road over here, and Sudbury State Forest is between it. It's all that very nice open space between Parmenter Road and White Pond Road. And the Cranberry Well is down here on Mulberry Creek. Sorry, the outside joke, inside joke. Here's White Pond. So I think most of you know about where we are. And this is where the radio tower is, right about there. So to locate it. And this is the line that I just took a stab at it, that separates Assabet watershed through the lake and what is drainage that goes across White Pond Road, goes to Sudbury, and that is called Cranberry Creek. A little more of it. Here's the actual thing here. Here's Parmenter Road here. And this is called Cranberry Well because there is the cranberry bog. And if anybody knows anybody who knows anything about it being a bog, I have talked to people who kind of remember as a kid, much older than us, obviously, actually went there to pick cranberries. And I know it was a bog. It was an established bog because the outlet of it right here is a dam of considerable height. I mean, taller than I am. It's breached now, but it's clearly a dam. And the Firefighting Academy is his White Pond, and the Firefighting Academy is right on the north shore of White Pond. Now, how did we acquire this from who? Well, it was eminent domain taken. That's the fifth clause of the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution grants eminent domain. Always, the landowner can always say, no, I don't get enough money, I'm going to court, which was done. It took 15 years to settle this one. The town originally appropriated $2,000 after going through 3 different courts, they settled for $484,000. I don't know why they held out. I mean, they should have taken $2,000. But this is what happens with these kinds of things. And one of the key people who own much of this land through what is called LIC, Land Investment Corporation, was Roger Kane, a name probably familiar to many of you. But anyway, okay. Well, if you go there, if you go down Parmenter Road, immediately after the tracks, which is now the trail, go down that road, you come to a very unexciting couple of buildings. These are the buildings, and the wellhead's right under one of these buildings.
One to the right.
The one to the right. And then the big one is the PFAS. I don't want to get into that too much, but this is a nasty, forever chemical issue that is plaguing the area, especially to the east of here, because one of the major contributors to polyfluoride alkyl bromide stuff is firefighting foam. Jeez. And we happen to have a firefighting academy. Guess what? Major problem to the east, and it's affecting the far eastern side of Lake Boone, and especially Sudbury, which doesn't have town water. We do, so you could at least treat it. And as I understand it, that was paid for by Boyd Coating. That's what it was stated.
Precision coating
Okay, I thought it was Boyd before that.
before that.
Yeah, okay. But at any rate, that's one of the issues. One of the advantages of town water, at least you can collect it and treat it in one facility as opposed to each individual landowner, which is what people in Stowe are stuck with. Okay, if you go over to the other side of the Cranberry Bog area, this is right off White Pond Road, here's the dam. I mean, this was no just backyard job. So
Where is that?
that is, if you go White Pond Road, Cranberry Lane, which goes west. At the end of the road, you walk through the woods, not far, bingo, there you are. And that's obviously what dammed this up. Now, whether a cranberry bog existed naturally before this, I'd love to know. Okay, the Firefighting Academy, Forever Chemicals, I'm just going to zip through it because this doesn't really affect us directly. This is from the driveway of the academy looking, and that's White Pond. I mean, if you go there, you realize if White Pond comes up another foot, it's going to go over the road. It's very close. Well, here is White Pond here. This is the town line. Northern half of White Pond is Stowe. Southern half is Hudson. Here's the Firefighting Academy. Here is Lake Boone, the Hudson Road, right through here. The arrows indicate the direction of groundwater flow, and in the groundwater flow, this is a cross section, the groundwater flow which is being utilized. This is White Pond. This is from the side. White Pond here. Here's the Firefighting Academy here. And you can notice the arrows. Interesting, and the most important thing of this, and which I didn't have time to deal with here, is the geology of the groundwater. But this is bedrock, the gray. And the buff on top of it is overburden deposited by the glacier. And that's what we get the water from primarily. I mean, you can get water from bedrock as long as it's fractured. But you can guess there probably was the worst place to put a fire academy, on the top of the hill from which the water is going to drain. But anyway, yeah, these are the plumes. Here's White Pond. They've done a lot of study of this. That is the groundwater plume. That is the bedrock. And this is all of White Pond. and the area that we talked about before is over here. Okay, our representative, Kate Hogan, has put in a bill to try to assist communities about PFAS. But anyway, that's what that is. Okay, I'm just going to crank through these. Here's the Academy here. Here's Main Street. Here's Fur Julian's right here. And if you take the rail trail, you go by the backside of the hill. It's a beautiful, beautiful ride, beautiful walk. And along Fort Meadow Brook, which is draining from the reservoir. But anyway, we got 3 wells there developed in the 60s. This is why pictures of wells are not very exciting. You get that. The Kane well is pretty much the same. This is right on Main Street, right next to this. In fact, I think I'm standing in the road that goes down to the well. There it is. Which building is which? Do you remember? Which building is which here, Tony?
The one in the middle is the well.
This is the well.
The one to the left is the potassium hydroxide, and the one to the right is just storage.
Ah, okay. And this is right at the end of that short drive, and just beyond it is the wetland. Okay, disuse. I'm going to zip through this Cox Street well. We mentioned this earlier. Right here. Here is Cox Street intersecting Old Stowe, Old Bolton Road. In that wetland, right across the street from the garage, is a well. Here's from the driveway looking across. You know this intersection, and that's the wetland. Rimkus well, hang on, we're just there. Here is 495, here's River Road, and there we are there. If you go in Four Bridges or Rimkus Road, it's kind of an abandoned road. That's it off River Road. That's the abandoned road, and bingo, you come to a slightly decrepit well house that was the Rimkus well. And if you go, you probably don't even notice this sign, but you notice this area here off Brigham Street where it turns into Donald Lynch Boulevard. And right along this street is a tie-in occasionally used for Hudson to get water from Marlboro, which in turn came from, I think, MWRA, MDC, and ultimately Quabbin. Yeah. This everybody gets, and it's a lot of interesting info. And the most interesting part is we're done. So there we go. Thank you very much.